You know, they're selling y'all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
Hey, pussy, are you still there?
I back. Trust me, I back.
But I'm not impressed by your performance.
Ele deu nothing. Ele deu nothing. Shut your fucking mouth, ele deu nothing. Ele deu fucking nothing. Not one of you deu nothing.
I'll tell you what, bro. You know, I was out there, I was fighting all the hitters, bro. You ain't fought no hitters.
Come on, guys. It's normal.
I'm not saying I would fight you. I would kill you.
John, do you think I'm just gonna sit there and let you kill me, John? I mean, really?
No, don't be scared, homie.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody. The double champ does what the fuck he wants.
I'm gonna beat you into the living death.
I mean, maybe that's your job, but where I come from, you know, people like that get slapped.
That's fucking illegal.
Nick Diaz, you just shook up the world. How's that feel?
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Yeah, this is a simulated death match. And you haven't simulated anybody's death yet.
I said it last year. We're not here just to take part. We're here to take over.
What is the game plan going in against him?
The game plan is you go in there, hit him with some good shit, don't get hit, and come home with a pocket full of cash.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Everybody's on steroids. The whole UFC, everybody.
I'm gonna go home tonight. I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
Do you want to be a fighter? That is my question.
Any of you radio personalities think you want smoke? Call me Mr. Chimney. I want smoke.
Yes. What is up? What is up? MCR family. Another daily edition of the show live on YouTube, obviously podcast form, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, etc. If you listen on iTunes, definitely drop that 5-star review. And right after the review, if you listen on YouTube right now live, hit the like button, share the show, subscribe. If you want to call in to debate the topics today, call in 323-870-4051. Press 1 to get in the queue for international. Email me, mixedcombatradio@gmail.com. Is Matt the Hipster Hunter. I'm ready for the smoke. I am. I don't know what about, but I'm just ready for the smoke, period. Obviously, it is UFC on Fox 31 review. Kevin Lee versus Iaquinta 2. We're going to review, obviously, that fight, the card itself, the news of the day for MMA and UFC. I do see Coach Mitty on the line, on the international line. I know he was not able to call in yesterday, I believe, and get his points across about the fights that happened over the weekend, the news that happened over the weekend for boxing. So I might allow Mitty to butt in here after we talk about UFC on Fox 31 to talk about some boxing potentially and piss Rob off because he's not here. Hashtag duck. Just saying.
I want smoke.
Just saying.
It's bullshit.
No, don't be scared, homie.
Just saying, Rob. Just saying, Rob. But anyways, digressing. Let's get through UFC on Fox 31. Let's break it down and review all of the action that happened in the cage. We're going to start halfway through the card. I'm not going to talk about every fight just because, A, not all the fights were the greatest, and B, not all the fights really matter that much for the end of the UFC on Fox era. Most of the card was irrelevant fights for the division that could have been seen on LFA, Bellator, or any other sort of small promotional company in the U.S. So I'm going to start with Jorge Close defeating Bobby Green via unanimous decision, and one that I'll be quite honest, I'll quote my man Usyk.
It's bullshit.
This was a bad decision. I thought Bobby Green won a clear 29-28 scorecard, won the first 2 rounds clearly, and lost the last round clearly. And yet they awarded Jorge Close a unanimous decision win in a fight that I thought he just did not perform well in until that last round. Bobby Green was, in my opinion, probably the best we've seen him in some time in that first 2 rounds, especially that first round. The way he worked his feints and his angles into his very unorthodox boxing-centric game, and also really implemented a ton of leg kicks, a ton of kicks to the knees of Jorge Close. And Close really had no idea how to deal with the feints at first from a technical aspect. He just really didn't know how to deal with the movement, the unorthodox nature of Bobby Green. Bobby Green's boxing ability, even though it has led him to lose at the highest level because he is, I think, too dependent on certain defensive techniques from the boxing game that really don't translate well into MMA. For this fight, that really didn't affect him, obviously, till the last round. And Drakkar Klose in that first 2 rounds was sort of stuck at mid-range or at long range, at the range of Bobby Green, wherever he felt comfortable, and was eating shots throughout. And it wasn't until that 3rd round where he decided, look, I obviously cannot jab my way in there. I obviously cannot box with this guy or kickbox with this guy. I got to just put my foot to the gas, go to 4th gear, and just be all-out aggressive and suffocate Bobby Green, which he did fantastically well. I thought that's what Drakkar Klose would do throughout the fight, and he only did that in the 3rd round. I don't know if that was, again, due to maybe the technical disadvantages he had and the mental sort of leap you have to go as a fighter to ignore those technical disadvantages, to go all out, to take on the fighter that's better than you in a very aggressive nature because you are naturally worried about that counter. But he was very effective in that last round. I don't know how he won the fight. I'm going to quickly go to MMA decisions and see what the official judges had it, because that was, again, I thought pretty bad. Call in 323-870-4051 if you want to call in, especially if you thought Drakkar Klose won. I definitely want to hear people that have that opinion as well. Quickly in the chat, Rick, Power Patreon member there, saying the 10-9 system for UFC/MMA sucks. It doesn't really. Well, I think the 10-9 system, period, is not the greatest. I think there are some tweaks we can have to it. I think it's close to the best scoring system we could probably have in combat sports, but there definitely needs to be some tweaks to it. Like I'm hugely in favor of half points. Like a 9.5 or a 8.5 instead of just a 9, 8, 7. I think judges, especially in MMA, more so than boxing, are really scared of giving rounds 10-8 rounds, giving rounds 10-10 rounds, because they're just 3-round fights and 5-round fights. For example, if you scored that last round, the 3rd round, a 10-8 round, and the first 2 rounds for Bobby Green, that's a draw. And I think the 10-9 system doesn't really accurately, to its fullest, reflect what is happening in the cage. And I think it has that same problem in boxing. Fernando in the chat saying, what's up, Matt? Hey, what days do you do TBV? Mostly Thursdays and Sundays with the occasional spontaneous show. Usually I will share the link that I'm doing the show on. So if I'm doing a show, look on my Twitter account. You can tell what shows I'm doing for what channel. But digressing to the fight itself. Bobby Green, what's next for him? I don't know. He mentioned retirement. I'm worried about that, to be quite honest. Not because I think that he can't retire, but just sad. Like it's a guy that has always been a perennial top 10, top 15 guy, and for him to retire off of this loss, where I thought he actually performed quite well, it would just be sort of depressing in a way, to be quite honest. Sal D'Amato, who's a awful judge, Brian Peculio, and Rick Winter gave the 1st and 3rd round to Drakkar Klose in the fight. For reference, out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 media scorecards that MMADecisions.com have, only 4 of those scored it for Drakkar Klose. The rest scored it for Bobby Green in a vast majority, which I agree. I think Bobby Green easily won this fight. I think scorecards all over the place on this card were, again, all over the place. But move on from this because, again, Bobby Green, what will happen to him next? I don't know. He's talked about retirement. He's sort of walked that back. I hope he continues fighting. I think he's a great talent and a great perennial top 15 gatekeeper, so to speak. I know fighters hate that word, but I think he has served that purpose quite well for the division. Drakkar Klose, he got lucky, in my opinion, with this scorecard, with this decision. Still a great prospect. I can't wait to see what he does and how he furthers and evolves his game, because he is very limited in overall just fight experience compared to Bobby Green. So, Drakkar Klose, I think this is a good learning experience for him, and hopefully we see a better version in his next fight. Moving on, Charles Oliveira submitting Jim Miller in the first round in under a minute and a half via rear naked choke. Just a dominant performance from Charles Oliveira, and really a sign that Jim Miller is just a shot fighter that is truly past his expiration date. Speaking of people that should retire, Jim Miller, of anyone on the card, should retire, to be quite honest. And Oliveira showed that. On top of that, Oliveira, I think, showing that he needs to stay at 155 and not go back down to 145. As a guy that is 6'1", I think he just does himself a disservice cutting that much weight and constantly missing weight as a result. Moving on from that, Rob Font defeating Sergio Pettis in a slight upset, I want to say. I forget what the exact odds were for the fight, but I think most people picked Sergio Pettis to win it. Rob Font, was just far bigger than Sergio Pettis, who's moving up from 125 to 135. Rob Font, as well, has always been above average on sort of everything, on a video game rating. He's like an 85 on like a UFC video game. He's like a 7 out of 10. He's always above average, and his striking has always been probably his bread and butter, his boxing ability. And being such the taller, rangier, bigger opponent in the cage, Sergio Pettis was just out of his depth, distance-wise, from Rob Brandt. And was constantly eating shots, was really having distinct trouble getting on the inside. And plus, Sergio Pettis predominantly wants to be an outside kickboxer. And when he is the smaller guy, that game plan doesn't really work. And Rob Font was able to easily beat him up for 3 rounds and made it look quite easy. And I think the hype train, if there still was one for Sergio Pettis, is officially gone. With 125 being quasi, canceled, depending on what happens with TJ Dillashaw versus Henry Cejudo at that weight class next year, Sergio Pettis doesn't look like he would be a legit contender at 135. Rob Font has always been that gatekeeper to the top 15 of that division. Sergio Pettis is clearly not that. Moving on, Edson Barboza versus Dan Hooker. Goddamn. Wow. This was just a brutal fight. Definitely go check out Anthony Walker's article. Obviously, Anthony Walker was here with me for the live fight chat on Saturday. He really went into, who was it? Rob Hines, the ref of this fight, for not stopping it. He went into the corner, obviously, of Dan Hooker for not stopping the fight between the second and third round. Dan Hooker, for all of his gifts, I think, just does not have a sense of game plan yet. I think he relies heavily on the fact that he is a giant lightweight, especially when he's at featherweight. He was a giant featherweight. He has decent kickboxing ability, like a Rob Font, above average and everything. But defensively, is lacking in a lot of categories. Doesn't really have lateral movement. Doesn't really have head movement in any sort of significant way. Upper body movement's non-existent. On top of that, his only defensive move is to slightly move his head, maybe off the center line, but sometimes still on the center line, and to bring his hands up from his waist to deflect shots. And over time, you can't do that at the highest level, obviously, especially against a guy that is Edson fucking Barboza. And Dan Hooker had really no sense of what to do in that fight with Edson Barboza. He wanted to be at range and have a kickboxing fight with Barboza, it seemed, from the very beginning. Had no intention of getting on the inside, clinching up, pressing Barboza against the cage, working his takedown game, trying to tire out Barboza. No, he wanted to kickbox with the only guy in the UFC that has used his kicks to knock out people to the legs, to the body, and to the head. He wanted to have a kickboxing game with that guy. Not really the smartest move from Dan Hooker, and one that hopefully when he goes back and watches the fight, and hopefully his coaches go back and watch the fight and go, look, obviously we had no idea what to do against Edson Barboza. We had no sense of game plan, or if they did, it wasn't even attempted to be executed at all, it seemed. And to Barboza's credit, when he is able to be at mid-range and long range and work his game, he is probably the most devastating kickboxer we have ever seen. He's up there with the Crow Cops. He's up there with the Aldos. He's up there with a lot of guys that we credit as being, the best Muay Thai guys, the best kickboxers, the Vanderlei Silvas of the past. Barboza, when he's in that real house, when he's in that lane, he is tough to beat. Look at the guys that Edson has lost to. They're guys that are multifaceted, guys that have great grappling ability, great scrambles against the cage. Guys that naturally have other facets of their game that they can rely on other than just striking. Tony Ferguson is a great example of that. A guy that is a very talented boxer, but his real advantage against Edson Barboza was in the scramble department. The fact that he was able to initiate so many grappling exchanges from the clinch and work Barboza to the ground and tire him out, that won him the decision in a very close competitive fight. And the Barboza of old that was a little bit defensively flawed, it was a little bit too static, that, very traditional Muay Thai fighter, that's long gone. His ability to slip off the center line, his ability to work a very lateral moving boxing-centric game has added just more depth to his striking arsenal that was already excellent. So what happens for Dan Hooker going forward? Maybe a James Vick fight, something along that lines. I'm going to mention, obviously, Kevin Lee and what happened for Kevin Lee going forward. James Vick is also another opponent that could be mentioned with those guys. Whatever should happen. Not a huge reset. I think Dan Hooker still is a great talent in the division, but clearly hit a IQ ceiling for the game, where he ran out of ideas. And at the very top, especially at this division, which is the deepest division arguably in all of combat sports, yeah, you need more than just being a very tall, rangy, devastating, kickboxer. You need more than that. You need a real sense of the game, a la Dominic Cruz in a way. You need more. Moving on, speaking of needing more, Kevin Lee was so close to winning this fight, in my opinion. Though, obviously, the first round seems to be a swing round where, depending how you score it, that first round, I think, determines who you thought won it. Live, I thought Kevin Lee won the fight. I thought he won the first 3 rounds. I thought Iaquinta won the last 2. Watching it again a couple of times, Iaquinta definitely could win that first round. And that last round, the 5th round, could easily be a 10-8 round for Al. I thought Kevin Lee, sort of speaking on sort of the Dan Hooker wavelength, never really stuck to a game plan. He was content boxing with Al. He was content being at the range that Al was comfortable in because he was getting his shots in. It wasn't like he was ineffective at that distance in that mode, but as the time wore on, Al's targeting of the body, Al's probably higher level of durability became a huge factor. On top of that, when Kevin Lee did get Al to the ground in the 2nd and 3rd round, I think he did tire himself out. I think he did gas out his legs with the body triangles when he took the back. I think that did play a factor, along with the targeted body work of Al Iaquinta. So Kevin Lee entering those championship rounds was slower, couldn't really slip off the center line like he used to in the 1st and 2nd round. His punches weren't coming as fast or as often, and Al was still fresh. And Al started really taking over and started doing a lot of damage to Kevin Lee, and was just the better boxer. Like, his striking ability was just better than Al Iaquinta, and he was decent enough, obviously, with his counter-wrestling, counter-grappling game to negate all of Kevin Lee's offensive wrestling and grappling maneuvers. And on top of that, Al's an interesting guy, because Rick obviously alluding to it in the chat saying, damn, real estate agent. Al Iaquinta, if you don't know, he's a guy that, A, is very involved in Project Spearhead, which is attempting to get fighters to sign employee identification cards, which is the first big step to unionization for employees or contractors, independent contractors, to get to employees, to get to a unionization state. So Al's always been very adversarial to the UFC, let's put it that way. On top of that, he's been a guy that's been highly inactive lately due to why? He doesn't get paid enough in the UFC and gets paid a lot being a real estate agent in the tri-state area. Look, he's just a weird guy. Like, he's one of those blue-collar fighters that is obviously extremely talented and you wish would fight more. But his role as this adversarial force against the UFC and a guy that is really highlighting the pay discrepancies, the income inequality between UFC execs and UFC fighters. Iaquinta headlined a Fox show, the last Fox show. For example, obviously Jamal Charlo are headlining a Fox show this weekend. I guarantee you, Charlo is getting paid 10 times more than Iaquinta. Guaranteed. And that's just an interesting sort of aspect of Al's career and legacy that I think has slightly started to transcend what he does in the cage. But then again, you get performances like last Saturday where Al showed, yeah, he's still a top 10, top 5 lightweight that could on any night give everyone a tough fight. He could. What's next for Al Iaquinta? God, obviously Justin Gaethje called him out. I think that would be a hell of a fight from an action perspective. Edson Barboza obviously winning on the same card. I would love an Edson Barboza Al Iaquinta fight. Tony Ferguson versus Al Iaquinta. I think that would be a fantastic fight. For Kevin Lee, James Vick, I mentioned as a guy that's lost recently that could be tied up with another guy that's lost recently as well. Paul Felder. Maybe the loser of Don Cerrone versus Alexander Hernandez. But somewhere around that, again, none of these top 4 guys, or actually the top 2 guys that lost in the 2 lightweight fights that headline and co-headline the UFC on Fox show, none of them should really dip in any significant ranking position, in my opinion. Dan Hooker is still a great contender / prospect in the division, and Kevin Lee is still a contender and very close to figuring it all out and getting into a real title contender mix, because he's just right outside that right now, in my opinion. Moving on to the news of the day. I know Coach Mitty messaged me and said that he doesn't want to talk. He just wants to listen today. Coach, if you do want to talk about the boxing over the weekend, I know you didn't call in. Let me know. No issue. I know you said that you can't talk until you sent me that message, though. I'm going to move over to the news of the day. Let's get the sad music out here, because it's time to talk about Nick Diaz, everyone. And this isn't a happy Nick Diaz news. God damn it. With Nick Diaz non-committal for UFC 235, Jorge Masvidal has called upon Neil Magny. God damn it. God damn it. Look, obviously, for those that have been listening to the show for any period of time, you know that I am a huge Diaz brother fan. For those that listen to the intro of this show, the Diaz brothers are literally half of the sound bites. For a reason. I'm a big fan of them. They're California guys, and when I came up in the sport in the mid-2000s, they were the representatives of California mixed martial arts. They just were. That team at Cesar Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in the Stockton, Fresno area was just the beacon of California MMA. It just was. There's this anti-authority enclave from the UFC in a way for a long time. So, again, it's hard for me to critique Nick Diaz and Nate Diaz because I am an admitted fanboy and biased person and commentator when it comes to this. I'll admit that, putting it out there, be very transparent about it. However, it is getting, I have to admit, very tiring of all these, Nick Diaz is fighting so-and-so because Dana White said so. Oh, wait, Nick Diaz just in Vegas smoking weed, doing Molly, and going to raves and having a good time. Yep, it's now been a few years of that, and it's hard. Again, I don't think it's Nick Diaz the one doing this. I think it's the UFC and specifically Dana White that wants to pressure Nick Diaz and Nate Diaz to come back. That's why they always mention them with fights that they aren't 100% signed to. There's no contract bout agreements that are signed, and they are the ones putting out this news to pressure the Diaz brothers to come back because they believe in some way, shape, or form that if a bunch of us fans get mad about the Diaz brothers not fighting, that the Diaz brothers will care about that and want to fight. And that's just not reality. Nick Diaz could literally give two shits about what his fans, or anyone thinks about his career, which I have no issue with. Same with Nate Diaz. That's been their brand, so it's not like it's new. And again, it's something that we accept. We accept their anti-hero branding, so to speak. But again, it's just annoying at this point. Like, it's just irritating. Like, we just want, as fans of the sport, I think across the board, even if you hate the Diaz brothers, wouldn't you want them to be active in their divisions? Like, isn't a 170-pound division with an active Nick Diaz in the past couple of years a better division? Same with Nate Diaz at 155. So, again, just disappointing in a lot of ways. I'm a huge fan of both guys, and they seem content to stick to their guns and force their negotiation leverage against the UFC for bigger paychecks. And it is prize fighting, and it again, not something I'm really going to get too upset at the end of the day, but again, an annoyance to say the least. Moving on, Jeremy Stephens versus Zabit Magomedsharipov is in the works for UFC 235. Also, the card that Robbie Lawler versus Ben Askren has been moved to, allegedly. I love this fight. And also, another major prospect being linked to a major veteran. Obviously, Hanato Morikano versus Jose Aldo. Chad Mendes versus Volkanovski. And now, obviously, Zabit Magomedsharipov versus Jeremy Stephens. The UFC has a obvious and great situation right now with creating new contenders at 145 for Max Holloway, if Holloway continues to stay in that division. If he doesn't, though, any of the winners of the fights I mentioned could be fighting each other for a vacant belt. Add in Yair Rodriguez, who just beat Korean Zombie in a great, fight of the year contender, knockout of the year contender. There's a ton of young names are finally, eating the old, so to speak, in the division at 145 and becoming the next wave of the contenders. Obviously, Brian Ortega, Max Holloway were the first ones to really break that glass ceiling. More are going to follow, including the names that we just mentioned, obviously. And moving on to the last news topic of the day, and then we'll head out of here if we have no callers. Again, 323-870-4051. Press 1 to get in the queue for international. Email me, mixedcombatradio@gmail.com to get a free international and permanent call-in link. Vitor Belfort. Vitor Belfort is back. Coming out of retirement and a free agent in 2019. Well, I think it's pretty obvious here. We're going to get Tito Ortiz versus Vitor Belfort at Golden Boy MMA event number 2. Am I right? Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. Or Bellator could pick him up, obviously. But Vitor Belfort, a guy that is still a massive name in Brazil, a massive name in MMA history, culture, and lexicon. He can do whatever he wants at this point. I guarantee you there are going to be promoters lined up to give him a deal as a free agent. Even if he won't get a huge deal, he's going to get a deal. He is Vitor Belfort. And obviously a Tito Ortiz fight and rematch in Golden Boy MMA. I'm not going to say it sells, but it's a significantly better fight than the Chuck Liddell fight, even though both fights are utterly shit. But beside that point, we're going to head on out of here. I hope everyone had a great day. A little short show because Rob didn't want to talk about Dylan White, Derek Chisora, on Showtime and on DAZN, a.k.a. he was ducking this work.
I want smoke.
Just saying. But have a great day, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, smash that like button, share the show, subscribe. And if you listen on podcast form, drop that 5-star review. Check out patreon.com/MixedTimberRadio. I am Matt, the Hipster Hunter. You can find me at Matt Hunter, MCR, all platforms. Have a great day. Peace.
Are you off your tits? Have you been smoking something?
Everybody's on steroids. The whole UFC, everybody.
I am Phil. I'm very Phil.
That's fucking illegal.
Just send me location. You know, they're selling you all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Come on, guys. It's normal.
Hey, pussy, are you still there?